Echoes in empty rooms. Josephine Mercer's fingers trembled as she held the receipt. It wasn't the amount, though $4,200 was certainly substantial, but the name of the jewelry store and the item description that made her stomach twist into knots. Custom platinum pendant, heart-shaped, inscription, "To my eternal flame, D." She'd been looking for Raymond's passport in his home office when she found it, tucked between tax documents from 3 years ago. Her husband of 16 years had never given her jewelry with inscriptions. Their anniversary had passed 2 months. Ego with just a practical kitchen appliance and a card signed. Hastily, the receipt dated back 4 years, right around when Raymond began his frequent business trips to Philadelphia. "Mom? Where's Dad?" Their 13-year-old daughter Penny appeared in the doorway, headphones around her neck. Josephine quickly slipped the receipt into her pocket. "Still at the office, honey. Big case." Raymond's law practice had been thriving, another reason she'd never questioned his late nights. Again? "He promised to help with my science project this weekend." "I know. I'll help instead," Josephine offered, though science had never been her strong suit. Before becoming a full-time mother, she'd been a cellist with the city orchestra. Another life, it seemed now. After Penny retreated to her room, Josephine continued searching. In the back of Raymond's filing cabinet, behind folders labeled insurance, she found a small lock box she'd never seen before. It took 3 attempts with different combinations before 0512 worked. May 12th, not a date significant to their family. Inside, a prepaid phone, a key with no identifying markers, and a small leather notebook. The phone was dead, but the notebook contained addresses, dates, and cryptic notes. One address appeared repeatedly, an apartment in Philadelphia's Society Hill neighborhood. Next to it, V, 7 p.m. Josephine set the notebook down, her breathing shallow. She wasn't a jealous person. She'd trusted Raymond implicitly for their entire marriage. Even now, her mind scrambled for innocent explanations. Perhaps V was a client with confidential legal troubles, but the pendant, the secret phone, the dates matching his trips. That night, she lay awake beside Raymond, studying his sleeping profile. At 45, he remained handsome, silver threading his dark hair, laugh lines deepening around his eyes. Those eyes that still crinkled when he smiled at her across the dinner table. Had it all been a performance? The next morning, after Raymond left for work and the children caught the school bus, Josephine called her sister Naomi. "I need you to watch Penny and Ethan this weekend," she said, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. "Everything okay?" "Raymond has another Philadelphia trip." "I thought I'd surprise him there," she answered, the lie slipping out easily. "How romantic." 16 years and still sneaking around like newlyweds, Naomi laughed. Josephine made no hotel reservations. Instead, she charted the address from the notebook on a map and researched bus schedules. The key she'd found, perhaps it opened an apartment door. The thought made her nauseous. In her closet, behind winter sweaters, she found the case containing her cello. She hadn't played in years, not seriously. Raymond had gently suggested selling it after Ethan was born. "We need the space," he'd reasoned, though their suburban home had plenty of rooms. She'd refused but stopped playing regularly, her music fading into the background of family life. She ran her fingers over the case now, feeling a different kind of longing, not just for answers about Raymond, but for the woman she'd been before. The Josephine who played Dvorak with passion, who'd once had dreams beyond maintaining a perfect home, that Josephine wouldn't hide from difficult truths. On Friday, she packed an overnight bag, hugged her children tight, and boarded a bus to Philadelphia, the mysterious key burning a hole in her pocket. The curator of secrets. The Philadelphia apartment building stood elegant and discreet, its brick exterior weathered by decades of city life. Josephine's heart hammered as she approached the entrance, her overnight bag suddenly feeling like a dead weight. The doorman barely glanced at her as she slipped inside behind a resident. The key fit perfectly into apartment 512, the same numbers as the lockbox combination. She hesitated before turning it, the reality of what she was doing suddenly overwhelming. Breaking into what might be someone's home. But whose home? Raymond's secret life? With a deep breath, she pushed the door open. The apartment was immaculate, minimalist furnishings, expensive artwork, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Not a temporary space, but a carefully curated home. On the entry table sat a framed photograph that stopped Josephine cold, Raymond with his arm around a striking woman with copper hair. They were on a beach somewhere tropical, both tanned and laughing. The intimacy between them was unmistakable. "Who are you?" The voice startled Josephine so badly she nearly dropped the frame. The woman from the photograph stood in the hallway entrance, wrapped in a silk robe, her copper hair wet from a shower. Up close, she was even more beautiful, early 40s with intelligent eyes that now narrowed in suspicion. "I'm Josephine Mercer," she managed to say, her voice surprisingly steady. "Raymond's wife." The woman's expression shifted from alarm to something more complex. Pity, perhaps. Or guilt. "Vivian Laurent," she replied after a long pause. "I'm guessing Ray doesn't know you're here." "Ray?" Josephine repeated. Raymond had always hated that nickname. Vivian gestured toward the living room. "You should sit down." Over the next hour, the architecture of Josephine's life collapsed around her. Vivian wasn't just Raymond's mistress. She was his business partner at a consulting firm he'd started 4 years ago. The law practice was still operational, but mostly handled by associates while Raymond built this parallel life. "He told me you knew about the business," Vivian said, pouring herself a second glass of wine. "That you weren't interested in the details." "And us?" Josephine asked. "Did he tell you I knew about that too?" Vivian's silence was answer enough. "I thought he was planning to tell you after Ethan graduates next year," Vivian finally said. "He talks about the kids constantly. He loves them." "How considerate of him to wait," Josephine replied, surprising herself with the bite in her voice. As she prepared to leave, Vivian stopped her. "There's something else you should know." She disappeared into a back room, returning with a folder. "The business is doing well, very well. These are the financial statements. Your name isn't on anything." Josephine took the folder. "Why are you helping me?" Vivian looked away. "I was married once too. My husband had 3 other women. No one warned me." On the bus ride home, Josephine studied the documents. Raymond had been funneling money into accounts she knew nothing about. Their joint accounts, the ones that paid their mortgage and children's education funds, held only a fraction of his true wealth. Her phone buzzed with a text from Raymond. "Case running long. Staying in city tonight. Kiss the kids for me." 16 years of marriage, and she'd never once checked his stories, never once suspected. The realization wasn't just heartbreaking, it was humiliating. When she arrived home, she found her old laptop in the attic and began searching. Raymond and Vivian's consulting firm specialized in healthcare reorganization. Their client list included major hospitals across the East Coast. Everything appeared legitimate and successful. She dug deeper, finding press photos of charity events. In 3 different pictures, spanning 2 years, there was Raymond with Vivian, both in elegant evening wear, her hand casually on his arm. In one, they were seated at what was clearly a Valentine's Day gala, champagne glasses raised in a toast. How many people knew? How many had seen these photos and recognized her husband with another woman? Had they pitied her? Laughed about the oblivious wife at home? By morning, Josephine had made 2 decisions. First, she would not confront Raymond immediately. Knowledge was power, and she needed more of it. Second, she would reclaim something of herself before their inevitable confrontation. She carried her cello case downstairs and, for the first time in years, opened it in the living room rather than hiding it away. The instrument felt both foreign and familiar in her hands, like meeting an old friend after a long separation. She began to play, tentatively at first, then with growing confidence, as dawn broke over their suburban home. Rebuilding from remnants. "A pleasure to see you again, Mrs. Mercer," said the gray-haired receptionist at Harrington and Associates, the law firm where Raymond supposedly spent his days. "It's been, 3 years since the holiday party?" "At least," Josephine replied with a practiced smile, holding up the insulated lunch bag. "Just dropping off Raymond's favorite sandwich. He forgot it this morning." The receptionist, Doris, according to her nameplate, lowered her voice. "He's not in today, dear. Philadelphia office again." She looked genuinely sympathetic. I can keep it in the fridge if you'd like. No need, Josephine said lightly. I'll surprise him at home tonight. In the 2 weeks since her Philadelphia discovery, Josephine had methodically reconstructed the elaborate fiction of her marriage. Raymond's law office days were actually split between minimal appearances at Harrington and trips to Philadelphia. His courtroom schedule was a fabrication. The late-night calls were often with Vivian, not clients. More disturbing was how skillfully he maintained the charade. He never missed important family events. He remembered birthdays and anniversaries. He checked homework and attended parent-teacher conferences. He was, in many ways, an attentive husband and devoted father, who happened to have a second life with another woman. Josephine had told no one, not even Naomi. Instead, she focused on rebuilding herself. She'd contacted her former orchestra director, Professor Thornhill, now in his 70s but still teaching at the conservatory. Josephine Adler, my God! I thought you'd vanished from the music world entirely, he'd exclaimed when she called. Mercer now, isn't it? Yes, I'm hoping to play again, she said. Not professionally, but nonsense. With your talent, come to my studio tomorrow. We'll assess where you are. Now, leaving Raymond's office building, she headed to her third lesson in 2 weeks. Her fingers were blistered and sore, but her technique was returning faster than she'd expected. Professor Thornhill had been both demanding and encouraging. You've lost some technical precision but gained emotional depth, he'd observed after her first session. Life does that to an artist. After her lesson, she stopped at a cafe near the conservatory. As she sipped her coffee, a familiar voice called her name. Felix Delaney, once first violin in the orchestra, now stood before her, his dark hair threaded with silver, but his smile just as warm as she remembered. Josephine Adler, as I live and breathe. I heard rumors you were haunting these hallways again. Their conversation flowed easily, years melting away. Felix had continued with the orchestra until becoming concertmaster at the symphony 5 years ago. He was divorced, had a 20-year-old daughter in college. And you? Still playing? He asked. Relearning, she admitted. It's been a long hiatus. The orchestra's doing a chamber series next month. We need a cellist for the Brahms Quintet. His eyes sparkled with the same enthusiasm she remembered. Interest? She started to decline automatically, her reflex for years when opportunities arose. Raymond always had reasons. The children needed her, the timing was inconvenient, her hobby was disrupting their routine. Instead, she heard herself say, I'd love to audition. Felix grinned. No audition necessary. I've heard you play Brahms. Thursday rehearsals 7 to 9. As they parted, he hesitated. It's really good to see you again, Joe. The music world missed you. At home. Josephine opened her closet and pulled out the storage boxes of clothes she'd kept from her orchestra days. Professional? Elegant pieces Raymond had subtly encouraged her to replace with more suburban mom-appropriate attire. She laid out a sleek black dress on the bed. Beside it, she placed the folder of financial documents from Vivian. The contrast struck her as oddly symbolic, her past and her uncertain future side by side. That evening, when Raymond called to say he'd be home late, she replied with practiced nonchalance. No problem. I've got cello practice anyway. A pause on the line. You're playing again? Just for myself, she said, the lie easy now. Something to fill the empty hours. The confrontation. The first Thursday chamber rehearsal coincided with one of Raymond's overnight court sessions in Philadelphia. Josephine arranged for the children to stay with Naomi, claiming a spa evening with friends. Felix greeted her warmly, introducing her to the other musicians, Damien on viola, Winston on second violin, and Olivia on first violin alongside Felix. They treated her not as a rusty amateur, but as the professional she once was. Brahms requires both technical precision and emotional maturity, Felix said as they positioned their chairs. Something you've always had in abundance, Joe. Playing with the group was like rediscovering a language she'd once been fluent in. Her fingers stumbled occasionally, but by the second hour, she was fully immersed in the music, her cello singing with a voice that was both familiar and newly discovered. Afterward, the group went for drinks at a nearby bistro. Josephine couldn't remember the last time she'd had an adult conversation that didn't revolve around children, household matters, or Raymond's carefully edited work stories. The musicians discussed compositions, debated interpretations, and shared gossip about the orchestra world she'd once been part of. "You disappeared so completely," Olivia remarked. "I heard you got married, but then nothing." "I prioritized family," Josephine said, the rehearsed explanation feeling hollow now. "Bullshit," Felix said quietly, refilling her wine glass. "You were too good to just walk away." What really happened? Perhaps it was the wine or the evening of music that had reconnected her to her true self, but Josephine found herself telling the truth. "My husband didn't forbid it, exactly. He just made it difficult, inconvenient. Eventually, I stopped fighting for it." "And now?" Felix asked. "Now I'm fighting again." She didn't elaborate on what else she was fighting for or against. When she returned home, the house was dark and silent. She poured herself another glass of wine and, on impulse, began playing her cello in the formal living room, a space usually reserved for Raymond's client dinners and holiday gatherings. The Brahms piece flowed from her fingers, filling the empty house with something that felt like defiance. She was so absorbed that she didn't hear the front door open. Only when the music ended did she notice Raymond standing in the doorway, his overnight bag still in hand, his expression unreadable. "I thought you were in Philadelphia," she said, not bothering to hide her surprise. Case settled early. "I thought I'd surprise you." He set down his bag. "You're playing again." "Yes." "You're good." "Better than I remember." He loosened his tie. "Who were you with tonight?" "Naomi said you had plans." "Chamber group," she replied, watching his face. "At the conservatory. You joined an ensemble?" "When did this happen?" "Recently." "When did you start a consulting company with Vivian Laurent?" The question hung in the air between them, a live grenade with its pin removed. Raymond's face cycled through shock, denial, and finally, resignation. "How long have you known?" "Long enough." She began carefully putting away her cello, buying time to steady her voice. "I've seen the apartment. Met Vivian. Seen the financial records." "It's not what you think." "It's exactly what I think," Josephine interrupted, her voice surprisingly calm. "A 16-year marriage, 2 children, and a complete double life. The only question is why you've bothered maintaining this charade for so long." Raymond sank into a chair. "The children—" "Don't." Her voice hardened. "Don't pretend this was for them. I do love you, Joe, in my way. Your way being division of assets. Compartmentalization? I was the reliable mother of your children, keeper of your respectable home, while Vivian got the passionate, ambitious Raymond. It wasn't planned. Vivian and I, we share business vision, ambition. One thing led to another. For 4 years." Josephine finally looked directly at him. "Did you ever intend to tell me?" His silence was damning. "I spoke to a lawyer yesterday," she said. "Your lawyer, actually, Harrison Wells. He was quite surprised to learn about your Philadelphia arrangement." Raymond's head snapped up. "You had no right." "I had every right. It's my life too, Raymond. Or at least it was supposed to be." The argument that followed was both more restrained and more devastating than she had imagined. Raymond alternated between justifications and pleading. The children would be crushed. They could still make it work. He could end things with Vivian. "I don't want you to end things with Vivian," Josephine said finally. "I want to end things with you." Raymond stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. "You've changed." "No," she corrected him. "I've remembered who I am." Walking into Sunlight Spring arrived with divorce papers and cherry blossoms. The children had taken the news with varying degrees of shock and anger. Ethan, at 17, with cold fury directed primarily at Raymond. Penny, at 13, with confusion that gradually gave way to resignation. Josephine had moved into a small apartment near the conservatory, taking only her personal belongings and her cello. Raymond remained in the family home, though he spent most weekdays in Philadelphia. The children divided their time between households according to their own preferences, which increasingly meant more days with Josephine. "Dad's place feels empty," Penny explained one evening while doing homework at Josephine's kitchen table. "Like he's just visiting his own life." The divorce proceedings revealed the full extent of Raymond's financial deceptions. The judge had not looked kindly on his attempts to hide assets, particularly those related to the consulting firm. Josephine's lawyer, not Harrison Wells, but a formidable woman named Deborah Zimmerman, had ensured that both children's education would be fully funded and that Josephine would receive a settlement, reflecting her contributions to Raymond's early career. More surprising to Josephine was how quickly she adapted to independence. She'd secured a position teaching cello at a private arts academy 3 days a week. The chamber group had become a regular commitment, with a small series of paid performances scheduled for summer. Her days had a rhythm of their own choosing, no longer structured around Raymond's preferences or schedule. Felix had become a steady presence in her life, first as a musical colleague, then as a friend who understood the person she had been and was becoming again. Their relationship evolved slowly, neither of them rushing toward definitions or commitments. "You're different when you play now," he told her after a particularly moving rehearsal. "There's an honesty in your interpretation that wasn't there before." "Betrayal as artistic development, not a teaching method I'd recommend," she'd replied with a wry smile. On a warm June evening, Josephine sat on her small balcony watching twilight settle over the city. Her phone buzzed with a text from Raymond. "Need to discuss summer arrangements for Penny. Available to talk?" 6 months ago, such a message would have sent her scrambling to accommodate his schedule. Now she simply replied, "Can meet tomorrow at 3, coffee shop on Maple." Her phone buzzed again almost immediately, but it wasn't Raymond responding. It was a group message from Felix to all the chamber musicians. "Just heard from Symphony Hall. They want us for the Fall Chamber Series. 5 performances, actual money. Thoughts?" One by one, the others responded enthusiastically. Josephine found herself smiling as she typed her reply, "I'm in." Later that night, as she practiced a particularly challenging passage from Dvořák, her first love in music, she realized she was playing for no one but herself. Not for an audience, not for approval, not to prove anything, just for the joy of creation and expression. The revelation brought her fingers to a halt on the strings. So much of her life had been spent seeking validation, from her parents, from conservatory professors, from Raymond. Even her initial return to music had been partially motivated by a desire to reclaim something Raymond had taken from her. But this moment was different. This was creation for its own sake, art without audience or approval. This was freedom. The next day, she met Raymond at the coffee shop as planned. He looked tired, the confident facade somewhat diminished. They discussed Penny's summer schedule civilly enough, but as they prepared to leave, he touched her arm. "Are you happy, Joe?" he asked, and she could see it wasn't entirely a selfish question. Some part of him genuinely wanted to know. She considered the question seriously. "I'm alive," she finally answered. "Completely alive. That's better than happy." He nodded, seeming to understand. "The children say you're playing in concerts now." "Yes, chamber music mostly. I'd like to come sometime. If that wouldn't be uncomfortable." Josephine studied his face, once so beloved, now a landscape of familiar features that no longer held power over her. "That would be fine," she said, and meant it. That evening, Felix invited her to dinner at his apartment. He cooked pasta while she described her conversation with Raymond. "Sounds like a peace offering," Felix observed, grating Parmesan over their plates. "Maybe, or curiosity. I'm not sure he ever really saw me. The actual me." Felix handed her a glass of wine. "His loss," he said simply. After dinner, they played together. Not the formal chamber pieces, but folk melodies and improvised harmonies, music for the pure pleasure of creation. When Felix kissed her, it felt both surprising and inevitable, like finding the perfect resolution to a complex musical phrase. "I've wanted to do that for 20 years, he admitted afterward. "Since we first played Dvořák together?" "I wasn't ready then," Josephine said, "and for a long time after. And now?" She thought about the question carefully. "Now I know who I am. Whether I'm with someone or not." She touched his face gently. "But I'd like to be with you, I think." Later, walking home under a canopy of stars, Josephine felt a lightness she hadn't experienced in years. Not because she had replaced Raymond with Felix, that would have been merely exchanging one dependency for another, but because she had rebuilt herself from the inside out, reclaiming the core of who she was. The betrayal that had shattered her world had ultimately freed her from a life of quiet compromise. She had walked away from Raymond not in anger or bitterness, but with the quiet dignity of a woman who knew her own worth. Tomorrow would bring rehearsals and teaching, time with her children, perhaps more evenings with Felix. But tonight, she was simply Josephine, musician, mother, survivor, walking into her future with her head high and her heart, at last, her own.